Welcome to a ride on the outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Start of a new era. Welcome back to the MMA Outsiders. This is episode 110. My name is Zain Bando. That is Pat Danna. To my right on my screen, and we are here. It is 2025 in the world of combat sports, and I guess we can officially say this is a new era of the MMA Outsiders. It's still going to be the same content that you're used to. It's just going to look a little different from a hosting perspective. Pat, how are you today?
I'm doing all right today, Zain. Thank you for having me on. It looks like this will be a normal occurrence now, huh?
Yeah, I think so. And you've been more known to be kind of the behind-the-scenes into the show. So for those of you who aren't, or for those who aren't as familiar with your work, well, can you kind of tell everyone just kind of about your stint on the show so far and what you hope to bring to the table as a co-host, considering that's how it's going to be moving forward?
Well, I've been around the show for a bit. I think it's been about a year now that I've been around the show. I was behind the scenes. I was helping everyone, not everyone, I guess, but Zain and Tom mostly, kind of just run the show. I was like a little bit of a producer. I'd bring things up on the side or just talk with them before and after the show. And then I'd do some of our football shows, some of our basketball shows, just tried to be involved at the network. And then here I am now, joining the MMA show. I'm just hoping that I can bring myself, basically. Just want to bring my own personality, my own takes, and just my own opinions, my own knowledge, everything I've been able to absorb since I started covering MMA just 2 years ago now. So just want to be able to bring everything I've been able to learn to the table.
For sure, and just to remind you who you are, my name is Zain Bando. Outside of network stuff, I'm a staff writer at MMA Knockout. You can catch Pat Danna's over at Combat Sports UK. Pat, you have anything exciting coming up in the pipeline in terms of interviews or anything like that?
No, nothing right now. I'm on a little bit of a break still going on, but hopefully, as the new year starts to really get rolling, I'll get the ball rolling as well.
Sounds good. And just to do a few quick reminders and orders of business before we get into what we're going to be discussing today, be sure to like and subscribe to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. This is really important as we just surpassed 900 subscribers. So the content is coming fast and furious. We just added a couple of new contributors to the team as well. So if you want to take a look at all of our content, it's very much appreciated. You could do so at youtube.com/ETP Network. It would be very much appreciated. And if you are watching on the video only side for this podcast, be sure to tune in over on the audio side as well. And of course, this is my reminder to say you can listen to the MMA Outsiders wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, YouTube Premium, and so much more. You can catch all of that stuff over there. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not remind everyone that the MMA Outsiders in every single show on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network is presented by Playback. And our Playback duties have been a little rampant as of late. We just introduced college football. And speaking of college football, we have a very, very exciting announcement. So without further ado, here we go on that. Presented by Playback, watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience, from playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. And of course, because this is a very, very big announcement and a very, very exciting announcement, college football is officially on Playback, and we will be bringing the national championship to all of you, so, which just gives you another reason to join in our community. So, college football is on Playback as the Ohio State Buckeyes take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It is Monday, January 20th. There's never been a path like this to the national championship as the final teams take the field, so everyone knows this is bigger. Coverage gets underway at 7:15 Eastern with our national championship pre-show, with the game starting at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Again, you can catch that on playback.tv/ETB network. Sign up for our community. Only takes a couple of seconds and it's free. Pat, how excited are you for the national championship, and do you think you'll end up making it?
I don't know if I'll be able to make it for the stream, but I am fairly excited for the national championship. I mean, I don't watch too much college football, but I was able to catch the game between Ohio State and Penn State. So that was pretty. No, not Penn State. Sorry, Ohio State and Texas. So that was a very fun game to watch before preparing myself for the national championship.
Of course, and I'm very excited to see how that game plays out as well. But that's college football. We're here to talk about MMA, and we have a lot to discuss in today's episode. But before we do that, Pat, what do you think as we get into 2025? What do you think is going to be the biggest storyline, or one of the biggest storylines that we're going to be following all year long? Because I feel like there's going to be a lot, but if you could pinpoint at least one, what would it be and why?
If I had to pinpoint one, I guess I'd have to say Jones-Aspinall, because Tom Aspinall did just recently say that he is preparing to start a training camp and preparing to start training for a fight that he expects to be against John Jones. So I think that's something that'll be monitored throughout at least the first half of the year, at the very least, to see if that fight actually happens and if that's getting in motion or not.
All right, Pat, officially kicking the show off. Now we're going to get into recapping what was UFC Vegas 101, the first UFC card of the year. You who did pretty well going 11-3. I did just okay going 7-7, but the one that I got right versus the one in which you didn't was the main event. It was Mackenzie Dern versus Amanda Ribas, the rematch, 5 years in the making. Mackenzie Dern gets the armbar finish. What did you think? What did you think of the fight?
I really wasn't confident about who was going to win the fight going in. I mean, they've both kind of almost digressed from what a lot of people thought they were at one point. And it was kind of hard for me to figure out who had digressed more since their first fight, because I feel like Ribas kind of handled her pretty easily in that first fight. So I didn't want to let that influence my decision too much. But at the end of the day, I didn't have enough to go off of. And I kind of leaned Ribas in that fight. And it was a little bit back and forth before the finish, but Dern was able to lock up that submission and really was able to get a marquee win on her record that she's needed.
Yeah, she's definitely needed it for sure, and it's just one of those wins where it's just another one of those contendership wins, if you will, where it's a feather in the cap. I mean, it's a fight that she had probably been targeting for quite some time, and Amanda Ribas is as tough as they come. But you were mentioning it to me off the air, this win-loss streak for Ribas. Given that Dern is, someone whom she's already beat, do you think we could see a trilogy down the line in the future? Maybe obviously not right away. And what do you think overall is next for Amanda Ribas? Because I think when you look at stock droppers versus stock risers, I think she was one of the biggest stock droppers on this card, and I don't think there's anything dismissing that. I understand arm bars happen. I understand you leave something out there and it's going to get exposed. That's exactly what happened in this fight. But given how even the fight was to the point of the submission loss for her, is holistically, what do you think is next for her, and what would you like to see just moving forward? Because I think the strawweight division, and I'm sure you kind of attest to this, considering that next month we're going to get the Weili Tatiana fight in Australia, that it's a very top heavy division, and I feel like some of these women are going to be stuck in limbo, and I feel like these are two of them. Where do you think they both go from here? And what do you think a loss like this for Ribas does for her career moving forward? Because I think going into this fight, she had a chance to really prove herself and go up in this series. And now I think there's major question marks that maybe people weren't expecting from, or maybe the Amanda Ribas that we saw a couple years ago where she got off to such a hot start in the promotion. So what do you think?
I just first off, to answer your first one, no, I don't think there's going to be a trilogy down the line. I just don't see the need for it, honestly. The rematch was even like, not unnecessary, but not necessary either. So a trilogy would just feel forced, and there's no reason that they need to fight for a third time. I don't think either of them are gonna
I don't think
win
it's
the
really.
title. So unless one of them won the title and the other one became a top contender again, I just don't see it happening. So I don't think they do a trilogy. And where Ribas goes from here, I mean, we talked about it before. She was win loss a lot coming into this fight, and now she's on the 2 fight losing streak, which could be showing signs of digressing even more, or could be showing signs of just a tough matchup in 2 back-to-back fights. I don't fully know. I mean, Ribas has only lost to some really high level top girls, so I don't know if she's necessarily done, but she's not definitely not in the best spot of her career, to say the least. She might be in one of the worst, honestly. So I'm not sure where she goes from here. I think we could see her fight a girl that's on the cusp of like a ranking, or maybe just getting ranked kind of thing. Maybe an up and comer to see if she can, take down the up and comer, or if the time's kind of past her a little bit.
Yeah, I could totally see that for sure. And yeah, I mean overall I think it was a big win for Mackenzie Dern, but at the same time, I just feel like, with the current state of the division, I feel like she's kind of back in the same position she was a few years ago where you just simply can't get a read on Dern. Kind of like what you said off the air a little bit too. I feel like it was one of those fights where it's hard to judge. It was hard to judge even before the rematch, and I think it's harder to judge even after the rematch. But out of all of the 14 fights on the card, there were a couple of notable performances that stood out. So let's talk about a couple of them. You and I have compiled together a list of fighters that we thought looked the most impressive throughout the main card and the undercard. So out of all of these fighters, including Klein as well, which one do you think was the most impressive? And guess I guess which one stood out to you as someone to watch in 2025 moving forward?
I mean, I gotta say Jacoby Smith. I have to. I mean, he was one of my top two prospects from the Contender Series this past season. I think he was my number two, to be exact. But I loved him. I loved the background. I loved what I saw from him before the UFC and in his Contender Series fight. And now he comes in against a tough opponent in Preston Parsons. Preston Parsons is not an easy guy to put away. He came out with a different energy in that fight, and you kind of saw that immediately. And just before you knew it, he had Parsons out cold with a beautiful left hook. I mean, a beautiful left hook. So Jacoby Smith is definitely my one to watch for 2025 to say, just to see his growth. But I think Fatima Kline could get farther within this year because like we were talking about, that 115 weight class in women's might be a little bit more top heavy, and I feel like she's one of those names that's not at the top already that we could see work her way into that mix with a very impressive year.
Yeah, and I guess you could say the same can be said for Roman Kopylov. And considering how long he's been in the UFC, considering the name that Chris Curtis is, I don't care what anybody says. I think to date that was the most impressive win of Roman Kopylov's career, controversial stoppage or not. What do you think?
I might have to agree with you because everyone was expecting him to gas late. That was the thing. It was like, okay, Kopylov looked great in the first round. He started to lose in moments in the second. But he won that third round before that head kick, even. He was winning that third round. And with the head kick, he clearly won the third round anyways, which that was a lot of people's biggest worry. My biggest worry as well was that gas tank. He's shown that he slows down later in fights. And this fight was fought at a ridiculous pace. Ridiculous. And he didn't slow down.
No,
So
he
that was
didn't.
that was very, very good, very telling, and I think that was very interesting. And I would say there was no grappling because there really wasn't. But Roman was shooting takedowns earlier in that fight. I don't know if you remember, but that was surprising. He was shooting. So he did gas himself by having unsuccessful takedown attempts, and even he had the successful one at one point too. So it was very, very interesting to see Kopilov's leveling up in this sport. I've always loved Kopylov, even after that loss to Duraev. I thought that was such an impressive performance, and we really are seeing the growth of Roman Kopylov right now. I mean, just he was able to eat some crazy hard punches and stay in the fire, and then just land that kick with 4 seconds left in the fight. I think is when it landed, but. Crazy, controversial stoppage or not, that Roman Kopylov performance was incredible.
Yeah, it was incredible for sure, and I'm sure you could attest to this as well. I think the biggest thing that Chris Curtis did that was slightly wrong was he just simply, to me, in that third round, when his striking seemed like it was picking up, he didn't push forward in the way that I expected, and I think he sort of left himself exposed a little bit. That's that's the issue, and of course, the big argument is over the stoppage, and I can understand why. But when you're getting when you're getting battered, when you're getting battered and bloodied up like that, and you're taking as much punishment as he did in those final 30 seconds, um, I'm not sure what else more the referee is supposed to do than what the referee did. I understand it was super debatable, but and I'm sure you'd agree with this next part. It's not like if the referee didn't stop the fight and it wasn't a TKO with 1 second left in regulation. It's not like Curtis would have somehow won the fight
Yeah.
or anything like that. He was clearly losing that. So
Yes, so the issue isn't with the loss. He was losing regardless. No
right,
question about it. I think it's the fact that it's the TKO now. I think that probably hurts his ego a bit more because I know Curtis is a guy that, you know, I feel like his ego is a big thing to him. And I'm not saying he has a big ego. I'm just saying his ego matters to him.
right,
And it was like after he got knocked out by Ray Cooper, it was a similar thing. And like, he needed some time and like he just doesn't like to get knocked out. He's known for as a guy that doesn't get chinned. So when he gets knocked out, he gets pissed off. And I'd understand because he wasn't knocked out there. He was hurt badly, but he wasn't out. Do I think Smith should have stopped the fight? Probably not, because I only think he stopped it because Kopylov walked away.
yeah, I
If
think so
Kopylov
too.
stayed on top and Curtis continued to fight him off, I think that there's no reason to stop the fight, right? But if
Right.
Kopylov were to follow up immediately and Curtis was out of it, then it would have been fine to stop the fight. But I think you should have let him, like, I feel like he let Roman dictate the stoppage more than he did, and that was my issue with it. I feel like once he saw Kopylov walked away, he looked at Curtis, who was hurt, obviously, on the ground, and just stopped the fight. Like, just because someone's hurt doesn't mean you stop the fight, We've seen guys
Interesting.
get hurt a lot. We've seen
Interesting.
guys get dropped and hurt a lot before. So I think he just dictated his reaction off of Roman's, and you just can't do that as a ref, You can't let the fighter tell you when to stop a fight.
No, you can't. But I guess at the same time, though, if he had fallen a different way, or if it was a totally different fight, I think you could make the argument that we would be having an entirely different discussion too. So
Probably.
there's also the there's also that gray area just to kind of factor in as well. Before we move off UFC Vegas 101 and tie a bow on it, this is something I used to do in every episode, even through this one. How would you grade UFC Vegas 101 on a scale from 1 to 10? And do you think this is one of the better UFC openers to a year in quite some time? Because I would argue this is the best. This was the best UFC fight night since the COVID one with Max Holloway and Calvin Kattar, which also took place. I think it was in January of 2021. That's the last time I can remember a fight night opener being as entertaining as this card was. What would you rate it as such?
I'd probably give it like an 8.5. I don't know if I'd say as far. I don't know if I'd go as far as you did by saying it was like one of the best since like 2021. I'm not sure, but I do agree it was an incredible card. I mean, we got so many finishes, so many good fights, just good scraps, and just a lot of like good prospects that we got to see shine. So
Yeah,
it was a great card for sure. I'd probably say like 8.5 for this card. What would you grade it?
it's a good question. Seeing the kick stream that Aiden Ross did during the fight, it seems like a bunch of people packed in the apex, which is good. As someone who's into the apex once, the more energy you can get into the apex, the better the atmosphere is. Thankfully, the card that I went to had the entire Vanderbilt baseball team in the venue, so it made the card a little bit more entertaining. So the more people you can get out to the apex, the better off you are. And I would say I would give this a solid 8. I think it was one more fight away from having that wow factor. I think we were one or two. I think we were one or two crazier finishes away. I know we had a couple of wild finishes. I know we had a few early knockouts. I know we had a few fights end with a couple seconds to go in whatever round, but I think it was really, really close to being on the doorstep of being like an all-time memorable UFC Vegas show. But I think for what it was a pretty good card.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree.
All right, now we're going to get into the bulk of the show. And of course, as always happens on this show, there always seems to be some major breaking news that pops up. So we're going to get right into it. So we do have some breaking news, as well as a couple of breaking news stories. And the biggest one off the top is the news that just came out earlier today at the time that we're recording this. For those of you, when it comes out later, this news will already be a day old. But the PFL has decided to restructure its promotion by eliminating the Bellator brand and doing some format changes to the overall promotion itself. This was revealed on the MMA Hour by Ariel Helwani, who had the exclusive scoop to this, and essentially revealed that Bellator is dissolving and is moving right into the PFL. I think you and I and plenty of other people within the MMA community figured that this was going to be coming at some point. We just didn't know when exactly it was going to happen. There was a lot of in limbo stuff. There were a lot of cards canceled within the past year that were very unexpected and given very little notice as to what exactly happened. And overall, just to get my quick thoughts on this, based on what Ariel shared, I think that this is a better structural move for the brand. I think moving to a Grand Prix style tournament for a portion of it, and then having other cards, be kind of the UFC version of traditional pay-per-view linear cards. I think it's a much better fit. And I was one of the people that couldn't stand the playoff format and the point system. It's something I had to be re-explained how the points were every single year, and even after it being re-explained to me over and over again, I still didn't get it. So to eliminate the whole standings thing and to take the best 8 fighters in each division and kind of see where everything goes, I think is a better overall opportunity, especially in a single elimination tournament format.
Well,
I
Zain, I
think
don't know if that's what's happening necessarily. They didn't say they're throwing the 8 best fighters in each division. They're just said they're doing 8-man tournaments. They're going to be having other fights on the side now. So I wouldn't say it's the 8 best fighters in each division. I'd actually be shocked if we got most of the best fighters in each division. I think most of the best fighters will now be fighting on the side. I don't think we're going to be seeing a lot of them in the tournament setting anymore.
interesting. Okay, hey, I didn't realize that there was a small caveat to it. My point still stands though, that I think a lot of things are being simplified in terms of what they're trying to do, which I think is an overall better direction. What do you think?
No, yeah, they've simplified it immensely. I mean, they had way too much going on. We always talked about it, right? They had way too much going on between PFL Europe, PFL MENA, PFL Africa, PFL Challenger Series, Bellator, Road to Dubai, whatever that was, which I guess we know now is what Bellator was or something. I don't know, but yeah. So basically, too much going on, and there has been for a really long time there. And now we're finally getting clarity, finally getting a structure we're more used to and something that people can just grasp a lot easier. So I'm hoping that they just don't mess this up, you know? They seem to have finally made the right decision of switching things up. Now it's time to execute properly. I know some people are seeing this as negative news. This isn't negative news, guys. This is what we wanted this whole time. This is what everyone has been asking for, and now it's happened, and people are complaining. Don't complain. Be happy that it's finally happened, and just hope that they don't mess this up, you know, because we know they've had trouble doing things properly in the past sometimes. This is the game plan's out there. The blueprint is out there on how to run an MMA promotion like this. They really just need to make the best fights possible, bring in good names, and just keep doing what they've been doing just with this new format now.
Well, number one, well, not just number one, make the best fights possible, but number two, have an event schedule that makes sense. I feel like all of these PFL events and then Bellator events were so scattered out to where we didn't know if events were going to be, unless it was the season format, we didn't know if events were going to be every week or every 2 weeks. Where it's like where it's like in the UFC, you don't even bat an eye about it. We're going to be in the middle of a stretch where they're going to be hosting an event 10 out of the next 11 weeks. With the PFL, you don't get that consistent pace of when all the shows are. So I hope it's the beginning of a change to where, you look at an overall PFL event schedule and the schedule actually makes logical sense. That's my biggest hope with this whole thing, because the hardest thing in following this sport, when it's a non-UFC promotion, is knowing when all of these other fights are. So
No, I agree, and that scheduling was a very big thing because, like you had just said, there's what 10 out of 11 of the next weeks have a UFC event.
yeah,
That 1 week that doesn't, right? What would that be? A perfect week to hold the PFL event, right? How many times were there like that where we were asking, like, where is the PFL event this week?
which actually that is what they're doing with Road to Dubai on the
Mhm,
25th, which is
exactly.
the week that there's no UFC event.
Exactly. And it's like that's a new thing that's happening now in 2025. I feel like last year there were so many times where there wasn't a UFC event and everyone would be like, "All right, is PFL on this week?" and they would be nowhere to be found, you know? This is now good because hopefully they can structure their events and help structure their events around when the UFC isn't going to be having their biggest events so they can get more eyes on their show. That's part of the problem that they've had too. They've been holding some of their events the same weekends as massive UFC cards, and then their news gets drowned out by the next day. You know, it's very tough.
Right. That, and also you made a wonderful point, and to piggyback off that, I'm sorry, I've been an MMA consumer for 16, 17 years. I can't even keep track. Actually, actually by 2026 it'll be 20 years. So I just answered my own question. MMA, I'm just gonna say it. Live MMA doesn't work on Wednesday nights and it doesn't work on Thursday nights. The PFL tried to overtake those days and it didn't resonate with the audience. You know why?
Nope.
Because you can't compete. You can't compete with the major four sports and expect to be successful during the week. You just can't.
Yeah, there you go. They weren't just competing with the UFC; they were competing with other major sports as well. Something I didn't even consider. You know, and you're right. You're 100% right.
So they need to figure out, okay, if we're really going to do Fridays and we're going to make and we're going to make Friday our hallmark day, which is what I hope they do in the future. I think that would be a perfect marketing strategy, because outside of regional MMA on Friday nights, there's no other major MMA competition. So if they can hone in on a day where there's no major fights during the week, or even maybe making Sundays during non-NFL months kind of a catalyst day for PFL events, that you need to really figure out what day can be their prime day to where they are the number one fight promotion on that day. Because if they keep reverting back to these Saturday morning shows and these early Saturday afternoon shows, in my humble opinion, it won't resonate.
No, yeah,
So
and I agree with you, and I'm happy that they're finally doing this, and hopefully, we'll be able to start seeing the better treatment of Bellator fighters, getting consistent offers and fight bookings, and now we can stop worrying about how fighters are treated because PFL puts on more events and can accommodate more fighters, you know? Like I'm just hoping it all works out. That's all we can do at the end of the day, right? We can watch and hope. We can support and hope and cover it and try
yeah,
to do the best we can, you know?
support, hope, cover it, go to as many physical US events as possible. I mean, and that's really it. The more
Because
I'm
at the end of the day, we don't make these decisions, you know?
right. I'm just gonna say, the more they can cater. This is what I've always believed about them, where I feel like they fall short. The more that they can cater to the fight fan that maybe doesn't know a whole lot about fighting, the more or the more successful they will be, because everybody knows the UFC as the three-letter major MMA brand. I don't think the PFL resonates in the same way. So I think from a marketing standpoint, they have a lot of work to do.
And I think that is possible too, because when I got into the sport 2, 3 years ago now, and no, probably like 5, 6 years ago when I first started watching. This is before I even started covering. This is when I started watching. I wasn't just a UFC fan. I was a PFL fan too. I was watching Chris Curtis back in the day in PFL live, you know? I
Right.
got into that stuff because I was so interested in this new sport and I saw there were multiple legit leagues, and I got interested in all of them because I realized that you can't just focus on one.
No, you
They
can't.
need to make fans realize that. They need to make new fans realize that you can't just focus on the UFC, that there's so much good talent outside of it, you know?
It's true. It's true. And I feel like really establishing themselves as like, hey, it's not that you can't make it to the UFC, but if you want a lucrative opportunity to, kind of be a building block for your career, it's the perfect promotion to go to.
Yeah.
That's what you need to sell it because, in my opinion, and I'm sure you'd agree, then this is no disrespect to them. They're so fixated on this whole co-leader thing that to me he to me they need to focus on what they're good at, which is finding homegrown talent, building up their own champions, and actually making fights that people care about
Yeah. Yeah.
with the roster they have.
No, well said. Very well
That's it.
said.
So
All right, I think it's enough for that topic. I think we can move on from that
I,
now.
I think so. I think so too. So we're gonna move over from the UFC octagon and the PFL smart cage to the boxing ring because we had some major news break earlier this morning at the time that we're recording this. Tyson Fury has decided to retire again. This is now the fourth public retirement that Tyson Fury has made, just coming off of another loss to Alexander Usyk in late December. Very, very cringeworthy video, to be quite honest with you. I'm just going to say this. I think this is all just it's the negotiation stunt for whoever he's going to fight next, and I think he's going to be back in maybe 12 to 16 weeks. What do you think?
I completely agree. I don't think Tyson Fury stays around. I mean, stays out of retirement for much longer. I think he'll be right back in the mix. He's gonna wanna start, getting his confidence back. Like he only lost to one guy, He's still the second best heavyweight on earth right now. And I think there's a decent margin there. And I think he's going to want to come back and remind people that at some point, right?
That's true, yeah.
Just knowing who Tyson Fury is as a person, he seems pissed off right now, and I get it. Cool if you think you got robbed. I didn't, but if you think you got
I
robbed,
didn't either.
I get it.
I thought it was a landslide loss. His
Yeah.
team his team totally disagrees. I don't know what they're on, but to say that rematch was 8-4 Fury is unfathomable to me.
Yeah.
I couldn't. If anybody scored it that way, they probably don't know the fundamentals of boxing. If that's the conclusion that you came to.
Yeah,
So
no, and I personally don't see this as anything more than just him being annoyed in the moment. So I don't want to waste much more on this because I really don't think it's a relevant topic right now.
So you thought we were done with breaking news for the episode because apparently we or literally as we were recording this breaking news came across both of our desks that former UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion Holly Holm is now a free agent, no longer with the UFC, left the promotion with 2 fights on her deal, and is now potentially pursuing new MMA opportunities or boxing, which is kind of what she was known for before coming into MMA anyway. So, Pat, what is your initial reaction to this? And you kind of just encapsulate more so what the breaking news was and kind of who reported it and that sort of thing.
Well, first off, it was reported by Uncrowned, Shaheen Al-Shadi on the article, so credit to him. First off, I mean, Holly Holm's gone. Okay, I guess. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not too upset. Holly Holm
No.
now, she's 40. What is she? 42, 43?
43. I'm pretty sure. Let me double verify that, but keep going.
I mean, this was something that was a long time coming, honestly. I mean, not to say that she deserved to be out, but she's older, She's
43. You nailed it, man.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
So she's on the tail end of her career. Like we should have known this was coming soon. It's just I wasn't expecting this today. I don't think a lot of people were. And I think the real interesting part is that she plans to continue fighting and had 2 fights left on her deal that she just didn't want to take anymore. She asked for her release. The UFC said, "We are fine with that. Thank you for your service." And I don't necessarily disagree with either side. If Holly thinks that she can go somewhere else and have a more successful career or just make more money, then I get it. And if the UFC doesn't really see any value in still having her, I understand that too, honestly, because she's 43 years old and she'll still probably beat a prospect or two, you know? So
Oh, for sure.
it would just hurt whatever prospect you're trying to build. And what, you're going to give Holly Holm a title shot in 2025?
No
No.
way.
You know what I
No.
mean? So from a business
Considering,
perspective, I get it. And from a
yeah.
Holly Holm perspective, I get it. So I think it was the best move for both parties, if you want my honesty.
Yeah, and considering the fact too, and you just made a great point. And considering the fact too, she's fought a who's who in every division that she's ever been a part of.
Oh, yeah.
So there's no reason to do the runaround and do, second fights and third fights of fights we've already seen in the past where we
Yeah.
know where we know how the story's going to go. And as you probably know, near the tail end of her career, even in the MBS fight, Holly Holm a couple years ago, no disrespect to her, she had the most legendary upset in UFC history nearly a decade ago, but you probably have to agree that even going into the MBS fight, some may even say after the GDR fight, she was just a name. That's it.
And
And
I do agree with that just because, I mean, she changed her style. The style that knocked out Ronda that made her popular wasn't a thing anymore. She became a boring clinch fighter, honestly. That wasn't what Holly Holm was known for, you know?
right.
She was known for boxing girls up and really using her hands, her kicks, and just everything, and that wasn't a thing now. She clearly changed so much as a fighter.
Mm-hmm. She really changed so much as a fighter for sure. And I think a lot of her free agency options are extremely interesting. I think if she goes to boxing, I think there's some relative challengers there. I obviously I'm not sure if I'm not sure if she could bulk up to the level that Carissa Shields is at or something like that. But I'm sure that there are fun fights for her there. And with this whole I guess I guess GFLTs, if you will, in the roster that they're building in the format, she could also be one of the one of the mainstays of that promotion, given how many notable names have already signed to it, and just given that people are not as in tune with what this whole team format is going to look like. It's still very confusing for most of us to grasp. So I say bringing in as many notable names as you can, bringing in as many former champions as you can. I think she would be a perfect fit for what GFL's business model is currently looking like. And I'm sure that it would make a lot of us tune in, considering that most of the names that are on the roster are names that either we grew up watching or you just know from like what we know about the history of the sport. So
Yeah.
I think overall, that would be a solid option for her. Or of course, if she wants to do some fun boxing exhibition fights, I would be down to see that as well. And hell, I mean, if Chris Cyborg still wants to do who still wants to do the boxing thing, I wouldn't and I wouldn't mind seeing that rematch in boxing either, given the history between those two.
No,
So
yeah, that would be a possibility on the table, but yeah, so Holly Holm no longer with the UFC.
yeah, oh, just kind of moving away from that, continuing with the UFC, the topic that we were going to get into before, obviously, we just had that breaking news. Is this might arguably be one of the most important stories that we talk about early on this year, and a story that's going to be continued to be followed, of course. But it was reported by Bloomberg just a couple hours before UFC Vegas 101 that there are a couple of rights bidders on the table for the new UFC television deal in the United States that would begin at the beginning of 2026. Some of the most notable ones: Warner Brothers Discovery, Netflix, and then of course Amazon. And as you and I both know, in the United States, the UFC's exclusivity, if you will, is with ESPN Plus. That's where all of the events are distributed here. And I think a lot of people have a lot of interesting opinions about this, considering the UFC's built for social model. I'll go first. I think that the UFC on Netflix is a home run. I think you can do so many things with the Netflix platform. You could see the Ultimate Fighter go over there. You could see Dana White Contender Series go over there. You could see the majority of the Fight Night events go over there. And I also think if the UFC was smart, which they obviously won't do this because they want to make as much money as they can. But if one of these services actually understood the MMA consumer and hey, look, we understand that there are some MMA fans that like to watch everything. Well, one of these services should be smart enough to just say, hey, look, here's a tier, here's every single UFC event, here's one yearly subscription, buy it or don't. That's what I think.
So what we like forgot to include in the headline in this story that we should have was that they're seeking 1 billion a year in TV rights.
Mm-hmm.
The last time they secured a deal for TV rights with ESPN was a $2 billion deal over 5 years. So that just shows how much the company has risen since then, which is awesome. You know, you love to see that clear growth, clear sign of growth. But I don't know where I want to see the UFC. I know from what I know, Amazon Prime made a push for Bellator.
Interesting.
Like now, like for that event, Road to Dubai, Usman versus Paul Hughes. So if Amazon is that serious about getting into MMA, they'll throw the bank at the UFC. They have the bank to do it. I mean, they all
and they
do
already do
realistically.
and they already do PPC fights.
Yeah, so Amazon's an interesting player in this for me, but I think in a perfect world they stay on ESPN because that has the biggest reach and it's made for sports, you know?
Well, but would you say that they stay on ESPN, but they move to multiple networks like other sports, or do you think that if they were to stay with ESPN, it would just be ESPN and that's it?
I think if they were to stay with ESPN, it would probably just be ESPN, but a move to multiple networks isn't out of the question. Like it just seems like such more of like it seems so much more lucrative, you know? You can get so much more money separately than you can for one big deal jumbled up. So even though it would suck for the consumers, it would be great for them business-wise. So I could very well see that being on the table as well.
And I'm sure you'd agree. Unfortunately, knowing how the UFC's business model works, I don't think pay-per-view is going away anytime soon. Would you agree
No,
with
yeah, I
that?
don't think so.
Well,
I can't see it.
it would just be so interesting if there was just one tier where you just get every single
They just have to
UFC.
restructure all the not all the contracts, but a bunch of the contracts then. There's fighters that like are entailed pay-per-view points when they're champions and stuff, you know? Like
No,
it would
I
change a
know.
lot. Like people don't realize how much that actually would change. It changes a lot legally, you know?
That's correct.
There's a lot that changes with that. It's not some easy decision. So while I would love for them to get rid of the pay-per-view model because I think it's dying and I think it's not the way to go with the sport, it's a long process. So it could already be something that's in the works that they need time on, you know? So I don't know. I'd like for that to be in the process though. And I see you just got scared there. But yeah.
One second.
No, you're good.
Okay. You can continue with what you were saying.
No, I just think that wherever the UFC ends up, it'll be somewhere solid. And I think that I don't know. I just think that they know what they're doing at the end of the day. They're very smart. They know how to grow their brand, and I trust them. I trust them to make the right decision that'll hopefully keep fans around for even longer and bring new ones in.
Yeah, I think it's too early for me to make a prediction, but if I were to make one right now, I would say um I would say it's still going to be a 42 event a year model, but I think it's going to be broken. This is assuming that the UFC stays with ESPN. I think it's going to be very specific, and I could be reading too much into this, but I feel like it only makes sense to think about it this way. I think ESPN is going to realize, okay, you guys have so much content. Here is 20 events, and we're going to only be on this version of our platform. Here's another 15 or so events that we don't really know where we're going to put them. Um, Fight Pass gets exclusivity to them, and then the pay-per-views would just remain as they are. That,
That'd be
that's
interesting.
that's what I feel. I just feel like there are some UFC Fight Night events to me that are lower tier, quote unquote, where I feel like some of these events that maybe aren't as high profile as some of these UFC Vegas events that we have coming up in this new structure that I'm proposing would fall into this hypothetical ABC tier that I'm thinking about. So
Very interesting.
you have fights where it's like, okay, if it's a number 12 versus number 15 ranked fighter in the main event, this is a C-tier level fight night where you can only get it on ESPN Plus. If it's a borderline top 10 fight and the names are names that people know, okay, we'll throw it on linear ESPN. And if it's a major fight night card where it's maybe like an Umar Nurmagomedov Corey Sandhagen situation, okay, ABC gets the rights to it because both of these guys in this hypothetical a win gets them an eventual title shot, and of course you have the structured pay-per-views and the numbered events as they are currently. That's why we look at it, because it gives the fans an incentive to say, hey, this version of UFC Fight Night this week isn't very good. I don't need to stay home and see it, versus a B and A tier version of a show would maybe entice people with more ranked matchups to say, hey, I'm going to throw up ESPN Plus and this is the UFC Fight Night I'm going to watch, and I can be more selective in the cards that I choose to see versus not, instead of just lumping them all one after another, because I feel like ESPN should know by now that the UFC is built for social media, and if they've started to figure that out, they should know that the significance of every single UFC main event is not going to weigh the same every single week. And I think that that's something that these rights bidders, if they're smart and if they're actual fight consumers, would understand. Which unfortunately, I don't think a lot of these people in the TV exec world think of it in the way I'm thinking of it. But from a consumer perspective, in my opinion, you have to give someone a reason to stay home on a Saturday night and say, hey, I'm going to blow up ESPN Plus and watch UFC Fight Night, or I'm going to pay $70-$80 to watch this pay-per-view, because if you don't, there's simply zero incentive to do anything at all. What do you think?
I don't know if I fully agree, but I do want to keep the show moving because I think we've spent a little bit too much time on this topic, if you want my honesty.
Fair enough. Well, speaking of the UFC, it is the first pay-per-view of the year, UFC 311. We do have to get to the elephant in the room, which is the location of the event. Obviously, we've had some very, very serious and very, very dangerous wildfires, which actually nearly could have changed the location of the event. But as of right now, the event is still on for Los Angeles at the Intuit Dome. It's just really briefly before we get into the card, when you first saw all of this stuff going on, just kind of with LA and with sports being postponed and with the Vikings Rams game having been moved to Arizona, what was kind of your initial reaction to this? Just considering that where you and I live, this is a very non-common occurrence. So just kind of give me your overall initial thoughts on everything that you saw.
I don't know. It's weird. I thought they would have moved it already, honestly. Like, it feels like, why even risk it, you know? I know everything's planned out, but they could very easily move it to Vegas, if I feel like. And I feel like the longer they wait and the more they wait it out, that if something does happen, the less prepared they'll be. But maybe they've been preparing this whole time behind the scenes just in case, which would be the smart thing to do, in my opinion. And that's probably what they are doing, to be fair.
Yeah, which actually I did do some research, and on that same Aiden Ross kick stream, Dana White was sitting with Hunter Campbell and Skipper Kelp in his back green room at the Apex, and it's literally all they were talking about for 2 hours, which was what were they going to do if this got even worse. So I think it's been, I don't know for certain, but if I were to guess, I think it's been very top of mind at UFC HQ what their contingency plan is going to be moving forward with this event. But considering that they just scheduled the press conference and the fan experience and the ceremonial weigh-in, it's looking like 99.9% sure this event is going to go off in LA without a hitch, and hopefully we won't have too much to be worried about.
Yeah, so, I mean, if they feel it's okay, if they have people telling them, you know, the correct officials telling them that it's okay to go on with the show, who am I to say they're not? You know, I don't know what I'm talking about. I live in New Jersey, you know,
neither do I.
Exactly. So we don't know. We don't know what we're talking about when it comes to, like, you know, if it's safe enough or not. Like, you know, like I'm not going to be able to tell you, dude. I don't know what a fire like that looks like in your town, in your city, you know. So if if the UFC is continuing to hold the event in Los Angeles, my guess is that the people who they asked told them it was okay, and those are the people that matter. I don't. I listen. I probably would have moved the event if I was the promoter, but
That's what I probably would. And two, just to have zero
chance.
had zero. Well, not just zero chance, but zero headaches whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Just there's zero chance for anything happening. Imagine like worst comes to worst, and the event has to get evacuated mid-event because the fire spread farther than they thought. Like that would suck.
yeah,
That would be horrible.
yeah.
Like we literally like what would happen at that point? I don't know. Do you? I really don't. So that's the problem. Is like I wouldn't even want to have that potentially as a risk. But I obviously, if it was, I think they would have moved it.
Yeah, I mean, I think to answer your question, and then we'll move on from this. One of two things would probably happen. Um, the pay-per-view time would get extended over from when it usually ends. Number one, or number two, he would just say, "Fuck it, we're pausing the event. And we're not gonna we're not gonna resume these fights from where they are, obviously, and we'll just reschedule them as they should on another week. Is what they would probably do.
Yeah,
So
yeah, probably. It's just why even try to risk that situation? They're probably not at the end of the day. They're probably not.
for sure, just getting into some brief fight news before we go in and preview UFC 311. We get a pretty wild story. There was rumblings going around that Alex Pereira was going to be moving up to heavyweight to fight Alexander Volkov. Pat, considering that you were one of the first people to see this, can you kind of just break down exactly what happened here, because the internet was going crazy. Several outlets which we won't name on here were running with it. I can tell you with certainty that my outlet didn't. We sat on it because we knew something was fishy on it, but just kind of give me your overall reaction to what exactly happened here with this whole Alex Pereira situation.
I mean, all right. So it had been put out there that Alex Pereira versus Alexander Volkov was going to be happening by Forbes of all places. Forbes, who doesn't break MMA news. So in their article, they had cited a Spanish MMA journalist. Forgive me for any incorrect pronunciation, but I want to say it was La Vierte was the journalist.
Okay.
And he has been in the business for a bit. I've known who he is for a bit. Very reliable, close with Alex Pereira, legit journalist. Problem is, he didn't post about this anywhere on his socials. So there was nothing backing this up other than this Forbes article. And then Leo Guimares comes out, and he's friends with La Vierte, and he says, no, this was just a rumor that he had brought up partially when asked about upcoming fights. This was never a fight he said was in the works or happening. It was just a rumor that had been going around. And then Kevin Iole, very briefly later, like probably not even 5 minutes later, came out and was like, yeah, there's no truth to this. Move on. So this whole situation was weird, but it either comes back to Forbes citing a source that had never told them something, or misunderstanding the source they asked and running with the news because they needed to meet a deadline. I think it's a disrespectful thing to do in journalism. I don't know who this guy from Forbes was that wrote the article breaking the news, but I don't know what place he thinks he has to break news like this, because he obviously didn't do the proper research beforehand. He obviously had no clue what he was talking about. And I honestly thought it was crazy that this was even started because of a guy that isn't very involved in the MMA scene, from what I know.
First off, very, very well said. Number one, and there's not really much more I want to add to this except what I'm about to say. I think it was clearly because some goofball editor who doesn't understand combat sports said, "Oh, we need a deadline, and
Yep.
we know that, and we know that once we hit this quota, our traffic is going to go crazy."
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as that.
And that's genuinely what I think happened. I think one of the editors at Forbes told their writer they needed a deadline, and the writer pushed for any information and ran with it without ever confirming anything. So I think, I'm not saying he wasn't in contact with Lavierte. I'm not saying Lavierte didn't tell him this, because from what I know, he did. But it was specified that it was a rumor and that there was not much truth behind it. At least nothing concrete, nothing we could point to that's like, oh, this might be happening because of this. It was just a rumor. I could start a rumor. You could start a rumor. We could say whatever we want at the end of the day and start whatever rumor we want. But you have to confirm things before reporting on them. And this was just a complete failure of that by the guy who wrote it at Forbes. And like you said, I don't even want to fully blame him. You're right, because it probably was his editor that has no clue what's going on, that has no clue how the sport works, that forced him to make a deadline. He panicked and ran with something that he had heard that wasn't true.
Was that, and given that you don't even know who wrote the article, that probably means that the journalist wasn't known before nor since.
Yeah.
So
yeah, not to trash him, but I just don't know where you come into the play announcing the light heavyweight champion is changing weight classes against another guy because of a rumor you heard when no one else has ever confirmed. Like, it was just wild to me. It really just seemed like they just wanted as much traffic as possible, wanted to meet that deadline. And it pisses me off as a journalist because I like to do things the right way. You like to do things the right way.
Of course.
Seeing people not do things the right way, especially when they work for reputable outlets, is pretty disgusting in my opinion.
And it's also disgusting considering that Forbes is the money outlet and they're supposed to be the authority, and that's what they got wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Really,
Yeah,
guys?
yeah.
Come on.
Exactly.
It's the same thing as, I don't know if you saw this, but it's the same thing as Business Insider putting out a whole profile on Dana White and referring to a UFC fight as a battle. Really, guys?
Yeah.
So anyway, with that being said, we have a few more news items before we get into the
just a couple quick little things, we want to touch on.
So we have a pay-per-view location officially set, UFC 314 in April. It's set for Miami. This is becoming sort of a newer thing now, the UFC hitting Florida in the mid to late part of spring. Are you excited for this card? Is given the look of it, considering it's in Miami, and if you had your ideal scenario, who would headline this one? What do you think?
First off, hell yeah, I'm excited. These Miami cards always deliver, right? I mean, I don't remember one of these Miami cards being horrible in recent memory, so hell yeah, I'm excited for a Miami card. Second off, I think we've probably both seen it. A lot of people have now. There's a heavy rumor out there that Alexander Volkanovski will be fighting Ilia Topuria in a rematch on this card.
There sure is.
That's what I want to see. That's it. I mean, do it then. If that's the rumor, if that's what you guys want to do it then. I'll check out the fight, because Topuria did what he needed to do. Like, Volk took the time off, right? Topuria went out there, beat Holloway. Volk took the time off that we wanted him to. We didn't want him to rush into a rematch, right? Well, he didn't. It's a year later, and this is what people asked for after that. People wanted Volk to get a rematch, but they didn't want to see him get it too soon. They didn't want to see this and that. Well, we waited. We got to see Ilias a legit champion, and Volk got his time off. So now this is what was asked for after they fought last year. Just do it. Why not? Right?
Yeah, do it. They're the two best fighters in the world in their division. This is probably Volkanovski's last crack at winning his belt back before he decides what he wants to do with the rest of his career. And he is just in such desperate need of a win that it only makes sense to give him the biggest and best fight possible, considering what he's been able to do for the sport, what he's been able to do for the division at large. And if Topuria is still so fixated on saying, "Oh, I'm the guy, I am going to be, the guy that Conor McGregor never was," this is his chance to go prove that he is still a legitimate champion for anybody who doesn't think so. And Volk, in my opinion, is the perfect guy to do it. So
no, and I mean, just like I said, Volk needed the rematch, right? I don't think anyone was arguing that Volk deserved a rematch after he lost the title, but no one wanted to see him fight Ilia next again. Right? No one wanted to see that a couple months later. Everyone wanted him to take time off and wait. It's happened. Let's do it. Like, there shouldn't be any argument when it comes to who should be headlining this card. If that's the rumor, do the fight. I know neither of those guys are turning the fight down unless they get injured. So you just let it happen, man. Let it happen. That's we got it. We like, I feel like their first fight, the second one could end even quicker, but it didn't go long enough. I wanted to see more of that first fight, So give us more of it. Let us see how it would have went if Ilya didn't catch him. Let us see if Ilya can catch him again. I really want to know because that first round was dead close. I don't know if you remember. That first round was dead even. I don't think I remember seeing such a 50-50 split with no one being confident in their scorecard.
I wasn't confident in mine.
No one was confident in their scorecard after that first round, and I had seen everyone saying Ilya, Max, not Max, sorry, Ilya, Volk, and it was like there was no clear, decisive, and then Ilya put him out with a amazing job. He trapped Volk and put him out, but can he do it again? Let's find out,
For sure. And speaking of another big fight that will hopefully take place later this year, these talks started to stir up a little bit, and then they started to die down, and now they're starting to stir back up again. So, the big ticket item, the biggest fight that could probably be made this year, Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall. Apparently, Joe Rogan had heard some sort of a rumor that that Jon Jones was asking for $30 million. This took the entire MMA community by storm. Every single MMA Instagram account that you know about, that I know about, was reposting this as if it was real. This was the wildest 72 hours on MMA Instagram and MMA Twitter.
Can I give you my hot take, Zain? I want to say it. I'm just going to give you my hot take. And I know this is a hot take. I don't think it was false. I think it was real. I think it was real, and I think Rogan put it out there when he wasn't supposed to, and Dana didn't want people to know the number, so he told Rogan to say it was a lie. But that's my personal take on it. I obviously could be wrong. It's not. I don't think it's that serious at the end of the day, right? I mean, Jones deserves money. We all know Jones deserves money. Right. How much are we really going to nitpick? I don't think so. So, I just think it is interesting. Like I do think it's. I think it's possible, I really do think it's possible that Jones could want tens of millions and that the UFC might be willing to grant it because he is Jon Jones, just a possibility. And honestly, would you be upset? Would you be upset if a fighter finally got paid what we thought they should be paid?
No, of course not.
A guy like Jon Jones deserves tens of millions of dollars. I mean, we watch football players get paid tens of millions of dollars for these contracts. It's a lot more than that, but yearly they get paid tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah, I mean,
Jon Jones is sending his career off with a massive fight that he doesn't want to take. Pay the man. Pay him what he wants at the end of the day. And it's good for the sport. It's good for the sport to see superstars getting this kind of money. So if I don't know if it's true, it probably isn't, but hot take, I do think it's true, and I think it's deserved.
Well, that number one, and number two, if everybody's going to call him the greatest fighter of all time, the greatest fighter that the UFC's ever seen, pay him like he is the greatest fighter the UFC's ever seen,
well
and
said.
there will be no questions.
So well said, and that's all I got for that one.
Fair enough. And one other thing I will say, I'm gonna go out in a bold limb and say that this headlines International Fight Week, late June in Las Vegas for UFC 317. What do you think?
I'm with you. I think that's exactly what is going to happen. If you want my complete honesty, I think that's what the UFC wants. I think that's what both parties involved, if the fight would happen, I think that's what they're gonna want, and I just think that's the perfect thing to happen.
And on top of that, you would also have the biggest fight in heavyweight history, headlining usually what is the biggest weekend for the UFC every year. So it would be the UFC's unofficial Super Bowl, and you better believe that tons of people would be flocking to Vegas to go to that.
And let's not forget, I mean, we underrate stuff like this, but like it's 2025. Like that's a stamp year, Like 2025 is like, it's not like it's a fairly important year, It's a number. It's interesting. So I'm curious because they're gonna want to do something big for a 2025 kind of year. Every 5 years you get those special, years, and this is one of them. This is one of them. And I feel like they're gonna want to do that special kind of thing. They didn't get to do that really in 2020. You know what they got? COVID. So they're gonna want to do it for 2025, in my opinion.
Yeah, and considering that in 2019 UFC 239 ended being one of the biggest cards of that year. Yeah, you're right. With the 5-year landmark coming up, they're gonna want to do something very special for it, especially considering that they were just off the heels of the UFC's 30-year anniversary a couple years ago too. They're gonna want to do something big, 100%.
Yeah, yeah, I'm thinking so.
All right, the final news story of the episode is actually quite a sad one. We had former UFC lightweight champion Khabib Nurmagomedov get kicked off of a Frontier Airlines flight that was going to Los Angeles, obviously for obvious reasons, so he could corner his guys at UFC 311. Very, very disturbing video overall. I'm just going to go first and say this. There is no other person that I would want on my airplane that could save my life in an emergency situation.
I said the same thing to my mom when I explained the situation to her because she had seen something about it and asked me, and I had said the same thing to her. There's not one person on that plane that I would have picked over Khabib being in that seat.
No way.
So I mean, do I think he was racially profiled? No. I think they were genuinely worried that his English wasn't great. But he showed he had good enough English at that point to sit
I
in the
think
seat.
so. I
And,
think
and
so too.
and my opinion is just, where do you draw the line? If someone has a French accent and has a very heavy accent, but they're speaking English, you can't let them sit in an exit row? Like, where do we draw the line here? That's my issue. And that's where maybe it was racial if he wasn't Muslim, maybe, and if it was a heavy, if it was a heavy French accent, the same situation might have not happened. So that's where I just get a little weird with exactly how this was handled and the way Frontier has stood their ground on it, because Frontier came out today and stood their ground on the situation, which, if anything, I thought they would back off completely and say, we messed up. Those crew members were fired, this, that. No, they stood their ground on it, which I think is going to lead to even worse issues for them, if you want my honesty.
Yeah, and obviously I'm not saying that they should know who Khabib is, but
Yeah, no.
but somebody and that if like crew could do a brief research and say, hey, this is a prominent person. We don't want to mess with that.
It's just crazy to me because he did speak English, he was speaking English to them. So I don't know where you draw the line. That's where I get worried now. Just not even in an MMA perspective or that, like in a real world perspective, where do you draw the line on how well someone has to speak English to sit in the exit row?
Yeah, that's a very powerful statement, my guy.
Like that's just that's just how I feel about this. Like, you have Indian heritage, right?
Pakistani heritage.
Pakistani heritage, right? If you went onto a plane with a thick Pakistani accent, but you were speaking English and they wanted to kick you out of the exit row, is that fair?
No, I don't think.
So why is this? Like, that's the thing. It's not really fair in my opinion. If you could speak the language and have a conversation, you should
Which
be
he
okay.
clearly, which he clearly was,
And that's the thing.
and based on the accounts, there was a Russian woman sitting 2 rows behind him defending him. She's
Yes,
like, yeah,
yes.
he's speaking English. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And that's just, so that's my take on the situation, is just, it sets a precedent that I don't think you want to set in today's society. I don't think that's something to play with.
no,
It's
no.
a serious thing to play with. And I think they should have stood off instead of stood up for their employees. I think they should have backed down.
Well, thankfully, even though this was a bad look from a viral video perspective, thankfully Khabib was able to get to Los Angeles safely, and thankfully he will be cornering his fighters this weekend. So just to know that he was able to make it to Los Angeles, that was the thing.
Yeah.
That was the thing that I was the most worried about. But at that point, I was like, is he gonna make it? And then
I knew he'd find a way. They not to sound like an asshole, but they have money. They'll find a way to get to LA. I wasn't even worried about that, honestly, because, like, and it's Khabib. He's not gonna miss out. He's not gonna miss that. He'll be there. So I wasn't even worried about that. I was just more worried, like I said, about the precedent it sets for the future.
well said. And speaking of LA, we're getting into the show that everybody's been waiting for. We're going to preview the first pay per view of the year, UFC 311 from the Intuit Dome. Main event of the evening, Islam Makhachev defends his lightweight title in a pretty critical rematch against Arman Tarzuki. And these two fought a very, very, very long time ago, back before they were as, I guess, relevant in the space as they are now. But from a hardcore fan's perspective, this is a fight that people have been waiting for quite some time. Uh, And how excited are you for this fight, and just kind of what is your early outlook? A couple of days out from the time that these two are going to step in there, because I think this fight has been teased for a while. It was obviously announced over a month ago. Well, I think people have been really excited for it. There's been almost like a mini countdown from spinning back fist 5 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, and now we're at the week of the fight. Now that it's finally here, what are your early thoughts? And just kind of give me a read as to what
I
to
mean,
what you see on this
I
one.
can't explain to you how happy I am to see this fight, how much I'm looking forward to this fight. You know why? I got to talk to both of these guys and ask them a question at the 311 press conference that they held in Las Vegas last month. This is the first time, Zan, I have talked to both UFC main eventing fighters before their fight. So this is a massive moment for me, even in my career, just because I'm gonna be watching two guys I was able to talk to fight for the UFC lightweight championship, and one of them is number one pound for pound, or number two. I don't know exactly where he is on the list. I don't remember if Jones hopped over him after Stipe or not. But either way, Islam's incredible. Arman's incredible. It's just so cool for me. I'm so happy as someone that was able to talk to both of these guys as a journalist, and then as a fan. I mean, come on. We saw this fight years ago. Arman at 22, 23 gave Islam one of his toughest UFC fights. Of course, it's awesome that we're going to see it again. Do I think the result is different? No. I do still think Islam Makhachev will win this fight.
I
But
think so too.
but that doesn't change the fact that I would need to see it. Just because you think someone's going to win a fight doesn't mean it'll happen. And this is one of those situations where Arman could have very well improved more than enough within these past couple of years to now be able to outdo Islam. It's really going to be interesting to see. And I think Arman is like, that's the thing. Arman won't give up. Islam's either going to have to put him out, put him down, whatever. Like, Arman's not going to give up. So if Islam isn't putting him away, Arman's going to be fighting hard until that final bell. And it's going to be really nice to see Islam just in another really tough title defense, man. We've just seen him take tough title defenses, and that's what a champion should be doing. They should be fighting tough guys in tough fights and still looking better, and he is. So that's what I expect we'll see here, but I do think Arman will put him to the test.
Yeah, I like Islam here too, just based on the simple fact that ever since he's won the belt, he's just looked at a whole different dimension. And this isn't to disrespect Arman's resume, because Arman's resume is very impressive. But when you have the pound for pound best fighter in the world, literally at the peak of his career, it's hard to pick against him until he loses, and that's the simple reason as to why I think Islam's going to win the fight. And I do agree with you to an extent that I think that I think the longer the fight goes, the more it gives Arman a chance. I could see this being a late finish, but I'm gonna go conservative and say that Islam Makhachev wins a very hard fought unanimous decision. I think it's gonna be 48 47 on at least one of the judges' scorecards, and 49-46 for the other two.
Okay.
That's my that's my overall outlook for the main event. Are you picking this to go to a decision, or do you think that Islam finishes them?
So I will be picking a late decision for this fight, but I might sprinkle a little bit of money on a late finish from Islam, because if you do remember, Arman did gas out a bit later in his fight against Gamrot. And that was one of his only fights that actually went the 5 round distance. So that's just something I'm going to be monitoring throughout the week, is what does Islam for a late finish betting lines look like? Because I'm interested to see how those look.
For sure. And taking a look at the co-main event, which is almost like a double main event, considering how good this fight is too.
Seriously.
We got Merab Dvalishvili making his first defense of his newly minted UFC bantamweight title against arguably the hottest fighter in the UFC right now, Umar Nurmagomedov. I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm more excited about the co-main event than I am about the main event, and I think I speak for, and I think I speak for a lot of people. There seems to just be a lot of tension between these two. It seems like Umar is really timid, and it just seems like Merab has just been wild and all over the place, and he doesn't seem to really have his head on straight in terms of the championship mindset, which is why I think we might end up getting an and New Year at the end of the night. But what do you think?
Ah, you know from personal experience that I I'm not the biggest fan of Merab. So it's going to be tough to see him in a title fight for me and pick him because I just don't like the guy, honestly. But when you compare this fight against Umar Nurmagomedov, the styles really do make it interesting because Merab is going to put the pressure and pace on him, you would assume. But it's weird because with the way he's been acting in the lead up to the fight, you'd expect him to come out heavy, right? Like heavy and hard, just like constantly putting on that pressure like he always does. But is it going to work the opposite? Because he's usually calm, right? Merab's usually calm going into fights, I'd say. Is it going to work opposite? And instead of going in and putting on the pressure and pace, is he going to psych himself out in his mind and end up being a lot less active than he usually is? It's weird. I'm thinking like, he might throw himself off here with the way he's acted up in the lead up to this fight. It seems like he's just been way too emotional, and he needs to be able to hone his energy in and just focus on putting that in his performance. He's put it all way too much on the mic, way too much on social media, dude. Umar's not going to go back and forth with you on social media.
No.
This isn't going to happen. This isn't like this. None of this is happening. Okay, you have to put all your energy into this fight because you know Umar is, and that's where I need to see Merab. I needed to see Merab's mindset change at some point, and it doesn't seem like it has.
And it didn't. That's number one. And number two, he was so fixated on deserving the fight, whatever, that he didn't do at the initial press conference that you were at. What he set out to do, which was make the fans believe in him. I think that there were more people who didn't believe in Merab after that press conference than people who did.
He lost more potential fans than he gained at that press conference because he just sat up there like whining the entire time. I don't know what that was. I don't know why he thought that was ever a good idea. He should be able to control his emotions. And based on my interactions with him too, it just seems like he doesn't know how to control his emotions. And sooner or later, that's going to pay him back in the cage. And this might be the fight because he's really just been unhinged in the lead up to this fight. So with that said, I do think Umar Nurmagomedov takes him out. And if you want my honesty, I have him doing it by knockout. I have him catching Merab because I think Merab is going to get angry. He's going to get over emotional and over aggressive. And I think we've seen in the past, I don't know if you remember, in the Henry Cejudo and Marlon Moraes fights, Merab ran into punches, the left hook specifically. Merab is susceptible to the left hook when he's coming in. And if he's going to be aggressive and come in way too hard in this fight, Umar could catch him with the same left hook that he knocked Raoni Barcelos out with. Do you remember when Umar knocked out Barcelos with that left hook and no one knew what happened because it didn't look like the punch even landed?
I do, yep.
We could see a similar thing here because Merab is susceptible to that left hook and Umar has knocked people out without us realizing with that left hook. And I think if Merab comes in too aggressive and he isn't fighting the style of fight. Well, his style of fight is normally aggressive, but if he is being over aggressive, trying to force his style instead of let it happen, that's where I think, Umar could catch him in one of these moments. And it's weird because I will say, I think people are underrating Merab's grappling coming in. Umar's an incredible grappler, but he isn't Khabib. And I think that people are making the mistake that Umar is going to dominate Merab on the ground. I don't think he is. I think Merab might even win the wrestling exchanges, and I think Merab might even get some good control time. But I think there will be scrambles. There'll be scrambling. No one's going to be dominating on the ground, in my opinion. But I think Merab will win those moments. And I think what it's going to come down to, in my opinion, I think Umar's significantly better on the feet. And I don't think there's a significant difference in the ground. I think just the way Umar approaches striking compared to Merab is so much more technical, and I think he might just be on another level. We saw it against Sandhagen, right? Who would have thought that Umar would have potentially shut out Sandhagen on the feet for the most part?
Because no one had ever done that. No one had ever done that to Sandhagen, maybe except TJ Dillashaw,
and that was a close fight. Like Umar clearly won and almost clearly won like every round. So it was like one of those things where like that fight proved to me, in my opinion, that Merab might win more wrestling exchanges, but that Umar striking might be better to the point where I don't know if it'll matter. His footwork, just everything. I think he'll be able to win with his striking in this fight, honestly.
Yeah, I'm picking Umar too. I actually think he finishes him, but I think it's later. I think it's a third round TKO.
Okay.
I think the fight's gonna go a little bit longer than some may expect. And again, I just think similar to you, I think Merab is gonna be careful. This is what I think is gonna happen. He's gonna do something stupid where he catches Umar for a brief second, doesn't jump on top of him to try to improve his position, lets him stand back up, and as Merab's hands drop, he gets caught.
Well, I mean, we saw him do the stupid shit against O'Malley, make him pay for it as much as we might have thought, but he did that stupid shit against O'Malley. We've seen it, you know?
That's what I think is going to happen.
And that's when he was emotional going into a fight, but he wasn't as emotional going into that fight. He was emotional because Tim started yelling at him during the fight.
That's
you
right.
know? That changed things a little bit, but it's because he didn't carry those emotions coming in, so I think he was still able to execute his game plan. The emotions have been all out for us to see for months now. Months he's been very emotional about this, and I think that's not going to play into his favor because Umar just doesn't care the way he does. He just doesn't care, and I don't know if that is going to hurt Umar and help Merab, but my read is that it doesn't. My read is that it's going to help Umar by the time the fight actually happens.
Okay, so we both agree on that, so we're picking and still for the main event and new for the co-main event, and that's going to wrap it up for another edition of the MMA Outsiders. This has been episode 110. Thank you for being with us with the Kings of this new era that it has just begun. I'm very, very excited to see what we can do with this thing. And just as a quick reminder, the MMA Outsiders is presented by Playback, and finally, before we close it out, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. You can do so youtube.com/ETB Network. Again, the official climb to 1,000 subscribers has begun. We just surpassed 900, so the more that you could support us, the better off we are. And also for Danna, my name is Amanda. This has been another edition of the MMA Outsiders, and we will see you guys next week to recap everything that is UFC 311 and preview the brand newly minted, if you will, road to Dubai and so much more. So until then, have a good one. See you guys soon.
Have a good one.